So Nightmare Alley was directed by Guillermo del Toro and it stars a whole bunch of people including Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, Toni Collette, Ron Perlman, Willem Dafoe, David Strathairn, Mary Steenburgen, Richard Jenkins. And it's about this man who has a very troubled past and he comes across this carnival and basically he tries to make himself into a carnival-like figure that you would see at a carnival, and basically his life begins to spiral completely out of control. So this was a movie I was kind of looking forward to. The trailers, in my opinion, didn't seem that interesting to me. I am interested in Guillermo del Toro as a filmmaker, even though he doesn't necessarily make some of my favorite movies, even though I love movies such as Pan's Labyrinth, for instance. His last few movies have been good, but have kind of missed the mark in some ways. I felt like a lot of them have just become way too obvious with their messages. And it looked like Nightmare Alley was going to be in the same ballpark as movies like, say, The Shape of Water or Crimson Peak, where the message is just so obvious. And this movie is interesting. It definitely has a lot of those Guillermo del Toro-isms, but overall, it's definitely an interesting experience. So what works? Mainly, a lot of the performances in this movie are really good, mainly from Bradley Cooper. This is one of his best performances. How his character just basically just spirals into madness is just insane. And by the end, I was just in awe of his performance. Also, Cate Blanchett's really good in this movie too. Her character, unfortunately, isn't in the movie as much as I thought she would be, but when she's on screen, she's really good as kind of this foil to Bradley Cooper, kind of a, not necessarily a femme fatale, but like, because this is kind of a noir movie, but she's really good as this kind of, you know, opponent to Bradley Cooper's character. Toni Collette, she's really good for a brief role. Willem Dafoe is also really good in his brief role. Such a good weekend for Willem Dafoe. This and Spider-Man No Way Home, I'm really happy for him. Also, there's a couple other small performances. Holt McCallany's really good in this brief performance, even though he's like, there's like nothing for him to do. He's just really good in this movie. David Strathairn has a brief moment in the movie. He gives a speech to Bradley Cooper, which I thought was really good. Richard Jenkins, Mary Steenburgen. All these actors have like a few scenes, but a lot of them do what they can with it, and it's actually really good. Also, pretty much everything about the production values are really good, like the cinematography, the production design, the score, the costume design, everything is incredibly well done, and it's interesting to look at. It's just, I'm never going to complain about Guillermo del Toro's for the visual, but it's really well done in this movie. And also, I really liked the carnival life in this movie, in the sense that I kind of like how they show it's basically kind of, you know, it's all a scam. And I really thought that was a really interesting take, because I feel like, yeah, it's seen before, but I kind of got a kick out of it, to be honest. Like in that scene where Toni Collette's doing this whole, you know, her premonition or whatever, her act, and like you can see people like writing on the board and so you can look at it. I thought that was really funny. And this movie is so unpredictable. I honestly couldn't predict where this movie was going. And I really like that. Like, in an age where we just predict everything and we just look up spoilers for movies. I'm looking at you, No Way Home. It's just really good to see a movie where I just don't see a lot of it coming. And also, this movie just gets better with each act, I feel like. Well, maybe not, but like, the first act was intriguing. The second act was a little slow, but still intriguing enough. And the third act is just off the wall. It's just insane, and it really stuck with me afterwards. This movie is really interesting, and I really dug it for the most part. So what's wrong with this movie? There are a couple things that are wrong. One, Rooney Mara. She's a good actress. I know she's a really good actress. Her character is just so thinly written that, honestly, any actress could have been in that role, and I just feel like it wouldn't have changed. Like, I would argue, oh, that's because of the style of movie they're evoking. Like, a lot of women do not have great roles in movies like that. Well, then, how is Cate Blanchett in this movie, and she's phenomenal? And how is Mary Steenburgen, like, really great despite her, like, 2 scenes? It just didn't really make sense, I guess. Also, Ron Perlman's in this movie. Yeah, I love Ron Perlman, but I just felt like he had nothing to do. Most of the actors do a great job, and Ron Perlman is a strong man who, you know, I'm not going to spoil or anything, but his character is honestly just pointless. He didn't really need to appear in the movie, and his character could have been cut, honestly. And honestly, I keep saying this with a lot of movies. Like I said this with West Side Story and House of Gucci. This movie is too long. This movie's 2.5 hours long. And, you know, there are some movies that, even though they're long, you never feel the length. I never felt the length with No Way Home. This movie I did a bit. And I felt like it really could have, like, picked it up in a few scenes. Like, I won't give any examples, but I feel like there have been moments where I'm like, you could pick this up a bit. Also, as I mentioned, there's a lot of obvious symbolism and obvious messaging in this movie. There's a scene in the movie where Bradley Cooper looks in a mirror and it's like, look at you, you sinner, or something like that. I'm like, oh my god, is this going to be another one of those movies where Guillermo del Toro thinks he's being subtle, but it's so obvious that literally a child could pick it up? No, it's not, but there's still the Guillermo del Toro-isms where, you know, it's supposed to be subtle, and yet it's so obvious that I'm just kind of rolling my eyes at times. And I just... Look, I love Guillermo del Toro's passion. I love that he's always doing something unique and interesting. But it's just too obvious, man. Just learn what the word subtle means and try to figure that out. But overall, Nightmare Alley is a movie that I strangely kind of recommend. It's very well acted. All the production values are great. I do really like how unpredictable and how crazy this movie gets, especially towards the end. I was just kind of like sitting in the theater, just like, oh my god, afterwards. But again, I don't really care for some of the performances. It's a little too long, and obvious messaging in a Guillermo del Toro movie. That's just a turnoff for me, to be honest. It's just way too obvious at times. And I feel like it could have just, if it wasn't so subtle, if it was a little more subtle, it would have been a really, really good movie. Instead, we get a passable enough movie that gets really crazy. So I'll give Nightmare Alley 3 out of 4 stars. See it? So, what's your favorite Guillermo del Toro movie? Did you see Nightmare Alley yet? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat, and stay safe.